Hey you, it's time to unboss.
Guess who's back? Better than ever. Let's go. We are unbossers. We do it for the love of people and business. Your change makers for human organizations. And this is yours truly, Nick the Unbosser. Let's go. Join me and my amazing guests. And unboss with me. 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 Unboss with me.
Hi there, and welcome to the fully refurbished Unbossers podcast. This is me, Nick the Unbosser, and this show and everything else we do with Unbossers is created by and for change makers for human organizations. Our goal with this show is to inspire and educate as many people as possible on how to combine the pursuit of business success with care for humanity. And this in a way that benefits all stakeholders of the organization. We talk with thought leaders and experts about the mindset, skills, tools, processes, and systems that turn business mambo-jumbo buzzwords like employee empowerment, customer centricity, agility, and entrepreneurship into daily operational reality. So, ladies and gentlemen, this podcast is brought to you thanks to the gift economy. Here's how it works. We gift our energy, our time, and our insights into making these podcasts. And you, dear listener, you get to choose what feels right to give back to us. It's as simple as that, and it's truly amazing. So please take a moment after listening to this episode and reflect on what would feel good for you to give back in return and help us continue creating this amazing content. Here are some top-of-mind ideas of what you could do. You could subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels. You could leave a review. You could recommend it to a friend, even make a small donation, or become an actual sponsor of the show. For more information, please check out www.unbossers.com. And now, without further ado, here's another inspiring episode of our Unbossers podcast. For the love of people and business. Okay, Jos. How you doing?
I'm fine.
You're
Thank
fine?
you. Yeah.
Charlotte and I, we were really looking forward to discuss this one very specific topic with you. Of course, most of our listeners, they know you, they know Buurtzorg, they know the model organization without managers and so on. But an observation that we like to share and discuss with you is the following, and that is that if you look in the domain of transforming traditional organizations to an organization without managers, maybe 99% of all initiatives in management schools, in consultancy companies, everywhere in the organizations themselves are focused on the leaders. We always say we need to start with the leaders, and when the leaders are transformed, then the rest will follow. And then a couple of weeks ago, we were together at Ibiza, and you said, why do we always focus so much on leadership? Aren't we overvaluing leadership and undervaluing the 99% of the rest of the organization? So that's the starting point of the conversation. Leadership versus accountability of the rest of the organization.
Yes. I think I need to close the door first.
Go ahead, no problem.
Now, I think it's a topic, Nick, that already for many years is a very important thing for me. And I think it started at the secondary school when I read Der Prozess from Franz Kafka. So I was always in my head, I thought, how can people have as much as possible autonomy in their lives and in their work? Because when systems takes over, structures and systems, then easily it's taking away the freedom, autonomy, but also the knowledge, which is everywhere. And for me, developing knowledge and using knowledge and experience from everybody creates a kind of collective intelligence. So if you look at nature, in nature, a lot of things happen by itself, but sometimes plants and trees are doing very intelligent things because it helps both of them, but there's no hierarchy. So, but it's, and I believe that in our lives, we do a lot of things which helps us to have a nice life. And if we do that in our workplace, we can also create much more than we think we can. So if you focus on leadership, then you have only one brain. And that's, in my opinion, the whole problem with management is that we focus on people who have the ability to lead and people who will follow. And I think that's a wrong assumption. So I believe that when we are born, when we are just starting our lives, everybody has the ability to lead and to develop themselves in a way that they can be of value in many, many ways. So if we ignore that by saying only one can be the leader and leadership is connected to a person, then we forget that all the others can be have a lot of value in the process we are going through. That's one thing. If one person is leading it, one of the difficulties is that the ownership you need with all the others will be much less or much slower. The moment you start with creating ownership, you have to also define what is leadership. So I see it as an integrated part of everybody. So for example, Professor Nonaka, a Japanese professor, wrote some nice articles about distributed leadership. So he said tacit knowledge, intuition, evidence, they are in all of us. And we should think about ways of organizing where the leadership comes up with everybody. So when I started with Buurtzorg, this was my idea. I'm not, for a lot of things, I'm not useful, I'm not necessary. The only thing I can be necessary for is to create an environment where leadership and craftsmanship can flourish. So, and that's my part in the leadership. But there are many things that people more or less are bothered by me if I would do something. So stepping away and being lazy is a very good attitude. So what I see in all this leadership programs, that it's often stimulates the ego. So you see that whoa, I'm a big leader.
Most important person in the room.
I'm important. So these are some of the things I think about when you
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing. And so, what about what's your take on the following? So, you have a traditional organization
Mm-hmm.
with the traditional model where the more important the decision, the higher up you need to go. Now, I think we agree transforming your organization structure and operating model from layers to an organization with no managers is quite an important decision.
Yeah.
So, do you feel that the transformation of these traditional corporate organizations always has to start paradoxically with the most important decision being taken by the one at the top? Or do you believe more in a grassroots movement in the organization stepping up and slowly but surely changing the organization from within? Or is there a third alternative?
I think you can't have a successful transformation if the person in the highest position is not aware about the advantages of the change. So there can be a lot of grassroots things happening, but if the management team or the CEO is not convinced that for the future of the company, of the future of the organization, it's not wise to do so, then it won't happen. So and I think the first thing what needs to happen then, if you have this awareness, or you say, okay, we need to change to be more effective, to be more flexible, to have a better connection with our environment and so on. That's a strategic choice, but it asks a lot from the one who's making this choice, because you have to go through a personal change, in my opinion, because you have been on this position usually for quite a long time, and you have to think about what does it mean for the way I'm acting myself. I had to think about this too when I started with Buurtzorg. I didn't know that until I started, that I also build a lot of routines in my daily practice. So I also learned the balanced scorecard and all kind of strategies, and till the nurses were asking me, what are we doing with this balanced scorecard? Why do we need it? I never used it again. So, but these patterns are in us, and we need time to reflect on that, and then we need to start a dialogue. So I see this as a process that you say, okay, there will be grassroots ideas always, in my opinion. There are a lot of wise people who see that things can be done in a different way. Let's put it that way. And if you connect with that feeling and you say, okay, I want to learn from you, the only thing that you say, okay, I'm going to listen instead of to tell people where they should think about. This process, if you are able to do that as a CEO and then become a kind of a servant leader, as you can say it in these words, then this process, I think, can be very, very successful. If you're not able to change your role, position, behavior, then I think you will have a very difficult process. So I think all these things, because it asks for another culture, like language, for example. All the management language are based on the idea that you have to develop strategies, policies, visions, and then tell the people. And now it's different, because you say, okay, I'm going to do the things which are needed, because you still have this responsibility, that the environment will change towards another way of doing things, and another way we look at ownership and leadership. So for me, this process can be a very wonderful process because it leads in every place to new insights. So you get new reflections, new ways of looking at yourself. And the people I saw doing it and being successful had also a lot of fulfillment and meaning out of this process. So that's the.
So in essentials, there is a paradox. Before I go to Charlotte, and for me, there's a paradox. So in a way, the goal is to create an environment where everyone can be a leader. But to get there, the first thing you need to do is actually go to the top leader and inspire him or her to go on this process and adventure. So it does start with the person at the top, which I see somehow a paradox in there. Charlotte, what's your question?
It's also important, Nick, to think about how important is leadership. Because as you started, you said perhaps we overvalue leadership.
Yeah.
But I think if you go back a few hundred years ago, then people wanted to do their work as good as possible, like an artist. See, think about an artist. Then a painter. We have in Flanders, in Belgium and Holland, we had a lot of famous painters. And they learned the painting from other good painters. And then you build a tradition that every painter, you start to work with a professional, very good painter, and you learn everything what he learned in his life, and you try to add something to it. But I never think that these painters were thinking in leadership ways. They were a senior painter or they were teaching. So the teaching part is much more important. So teaching all these small things that you can't learn from a book. So you have to learn it from a person who had the same process. And when you do it well, in your life, you can add something to it. So the next generation can be better.
Mm-hmm. In
this process, it's not about leading and not leading. It's about
teaching.
It's about teaching. So teaching in many ways can be about everything and is much more
fulfilling also.
Fulfilling, but also more, if you look at the services we deliver, products we make, in my opinion, every generation should do it better. Because we should learn from our former generations. Look at the Aboriginals. So if we look at how indigenous people throughout thousands of years took their experience and their knowledge over to the next generation. That's something that we unlearned. So it's not only about unbossing, but it's also about starting new ways of thinking how we can learn as a collective. Mm-hmm. But Charlotte, please.
Well, I was curious, Jos. I imagine that at Buurtzorg, leadership and craftsmanship or accountability is very much integrated. So what happens then? Because craftsmanship is also about always improving or changing things. What is happening then for the nurses? For example, during COVID, how did they deal with it?
Yes, I think COVID was a good example to see how the flexibility of the nurses can contribute to finding solutions. So what happened was that most of these nurses, first, they were not afraid about what was happening. they said, okay, this is our job. So when it comes, we will act. And they were not waiting for rules or regulations. Most of the nurses have a very good education. They know what to do when there is an infection. What we only needed to do within Buurtzorg was to create a kind of a way to reflect on it when they didn't know, because when you have something like COVID, for a lot of people, parts of this what happened was new. The impact was, so they needed a place to check if their ideas were right, for example. So we organized a kind of a crisis team, which was also a place where you could reflect on your ideas. So and it goes like people like in the south of Holland were confronted in the beginning with a very fast growing impact because a lot of people got infected. And then they were just asking, okay, I see this and this, and we're going to do that and that. Do you think, according to the researches we found, this is the right thing to do? That was enough. So to support them in that way, not to say you have to do this or you have to do that. No, it was just the other way around. So start with what you think is the best solution at that moment. And what we saw was that there was a lot of resilience in all these teams. So the moment a team was faced with a lot of patients with COVID, they started to respond to that. And then they put all the information they got or they learned, they put it on our web. So they said, okay, we had an ongoing process of exchanging ideas and exchanging knowledge and exchanging all the practices we met. And out of it, we developed the guidelines. So we said, okay, if this is what we see all over the country, then, and this is what we think is the most wise thing to do, then this will become more or less our guideline.
So,
and from an organization point of view, Jos, if you say we set up a crisis team, is it a nurses standing up like I want to be in that crisis team, or how does that work?
It was more or less based on a coincidence that we said if we have different kinds of knowledge in the team, then it will be most effective. So it was not, the nurses are just working in their teams, and most of these nurses, they want to help. Nurses always want to help. But if they're in the team, their focus is on patients. But we had some people who are doing projects. We had somebody who had a study, was an epidemiologist. The one who's responsible for the IT development, creating a community. So there were different disciplines. Different disciplines. So we said, and we had at the end, I think, 12 people. And it was also very practical that we said, like we have at the other teams, it should not be too big. So because then the flexibility goes away. And I was also part of this crisis team, but not as a dominant person. I was just listening and see what I could do to. So, and sometimes it was about money, because when we had to order a large amounts of tests or large amounts of safety materials, then it was about, okay, how can we afford this? Where do we get the money from? Because it was about millions of euros what we ordered. So creating comfort and creating support helped a lot. But at the end, it were the teams who did it all and who responded on what's happening in their environment. And what we saw was that was a difference with all the other organizations we saw in Holland. Because what we saw was that a lot of organizations said, now we need to command and control. So we need to direct our
Because
people.
it's crisis.
And then you see that this idea about this kind of leadership is leading completely to the opposite you want to achieve. So it was funny to see that the outside world, I talked with people who were, for example, mayor of some bigger places in Holland. And they said it was nice to see that your teams and your nurses just went on with their work. They found solutions for everything they had to deal with. And some other organizations, they got strict protocols for what they were allowed to do or not to do. And I believe now, if you look at, for example, the sickness rate is decreasing very fast now. And I think that has to do with that everybody had their own, could make their own choices, could also think about how can I stay healthy. There was less stress in the teams than in other places. So I think we have now more or less the lowest sickness rate in the country. And I think these two things are going together. So when you make your own choices, my conviction is that it leads to less stress. So you have more autonomy. And when other people are telling you what to do and you personally have another idea about it, then there is tension and it creates stress. So then you have to explain to your manager why you think differently. And if managers have the idea that they have to know more than the people they're leading, then and this process is happening in many organizations all the time. So I don't know if that's a good answer on your question.
It is. Thank you.
I'm also timekeeping, guys.
Oh, yeah.
In 5 minutes, you have another meeting, Jos. Typically, we wrap up the conversation with the question: imagine I'm a CEO of a company. I've listened to this conversation. I'm inspired to go on my own journey with my company. What is the biggest mistake I can make? And before you answer, I just heard one already, which is to go on this journey when everything is going well. And from the moment there is a small crisis or a big one, use it as an excuse to go back to the old way of command and control. So I think that's already a big mistake. But maybe to wrap up, Jos, what would be another one, despite my good intentions?
Yes, for the next meeting is already standing in front of my door. No, I think the biggest mistake is not to take the time to reflect on yourself and on others. So I think sensitivity is a very important thing to feel and understand where are you in this process yourself and your colleagues or the people who you're working with. So, and not being aware, I think that perhaps the biggest mistake is in not being aware that you developed all kinds of patterns which are not very useful for this transformation process. So they are in you if you have been working in a kind of position as a manager or a CEO for 10, 20 years perhaps, or even more. Then this daily behavior, it's so deep in you that you don't see it anymore. You don't feel it anymore. So you need time to get out of it.
That's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah. So first
Beautiful.
timer, I think. This is the 43rd episode or 44th. So yeah, it's the first time that someone emphasizes that part of awareness. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
inspiration. Have a great day, and looking forward to meeting you again soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, so that is a wrap for this episode of our Unbossers podcast. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all our future content. For the love of people and business, keep unbossing.